All of my pictures are from the TV show The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I have links at the end, so no copyright infringement is happening. So I think what's really important when you are thinking about what topic you should be speaking about is to ask yourself what drives you. Like maybe you want to share a technology or a process, either you know something really well or you're motivated to try, going deeper into a technology that's new to you. Or maybe you're working as a DevRel and you're, making connections with folks who are using your company's product is part of your work. And it may be that you're trying to start a conversation around a topic. So if you're a person who asks like, why would we do XYZ this way a whole lot within a technical setting, this might be you. And it might be that you're really excited about like the idea of speaking and you're like, what would it be like to stand up on stage in front of all those people? And you're really like driven by the notoriety. All of these reasons are perfectly good reasons to want to start speaking. But as far as choosing a topic, you'll need to, if you're in that last column and you're like in it for the notoriety, that's awesome. And there's plenty of room to do that. But there's some extra steps you're going to have to think about. So let's say you already have an idea. You're interested in creating a conversation around a topic, or you want to share technology or process. What made you think of that idea? If you're anything like me, often you come to a topic because of frustration with practices or trends that you're seeing. I jokingly call this pain-driven development, and it's definitely one of the things that keeps driving me forward. Now, the reason that this pain-driven development is really useful is the things that really grind on you every day are the things that you've thought about, researched, and probably can speak about. It's possible that you had an experience, whether technical or non-technical, that is worth sharing. So if you seriously had like a time learning something, entering open source, that can be useful to bring to a stage. Why? Because a lot of folks who have been in their positions a long time may have forgotten or never known what it's like to get started in 2018 or 2019. So you may be able to share an important perspective. Maybe you have a project that you want to, sing about from the rooftops, and hopefully you can find a piece an area where you can highlight a decision or a challenge that you had as you were building up this project. You might have a novel use of tech to share. So we all love Simone, the shitty robots, right? And here in the US, we have a conference called Bang Bang Con, and I'm sure there are equivalents other places, which is basically a whole conference of talks that make people say, wow, you can do that? Just people doing strange things with technology. And from my own experience, the talk, which is basically that one time I decided to save screenshots to my version control, is the talk that got me to an international stage. So if you're using tech in an unusual way, you probably have a whole bunch of folks that would love to hear about it, even if you think of it as something like, oh, there's just this Raspberry Pi sitting off to my computer and it does this thing, and like, I don't think about it much. There's probably a lot of folks who would love to hear more about it. So to sum up, if in conversation you're describing something to someone and you're hearing, oh, that's cool, a whole lot, you might have the start of a talk idea. So if you fell into that last column and you're coming here like, all right, I want to get started speaking. Now, what am I going to talk about? it's time to sit down and work on getting inspired. You can look at projects, workshops, docs you've written, things that you've made, and look at that content and ask yourself what you learned, what steps you had to take, what you had to do. And you can ask yourself, you can ask people, who are also in your field. I almost said the person sitting next to you, but we don't sit next to each other anymore. And see if like any parts of those or like any elements of that is like, oh, that's interesting. You can see if you're like me and you're coming from a different field, or you have like a strong hobby. You may be able to draw examples or bits of, like, everyone is interested in similarities between fields, like, and ways of thinking. And a lot of those ways of thinking, can really strengthen the way we think about our own subjects. So bringing that in is usually welcome as well. Now, I have shared, and these are all bit.ly links for now, but do not worry if you don't want to screenshot them at the moment, because we'll be sharing these slides later. There are a couple of blog posts I found that have like questions that are pretty broad, that ask you things like, what was a bug that you suffered through recently, or like, what is something you wish you had known when you were getting started? And what these posts propose is that you take a sheet of paper, you write down these prompts, and then you time yourself for 1 minute at a time. You just whatever you can think of, and then find somebody to do this with, and do a swap, and see what they find interesting. And a lot of people are really surprised at how some of the mundane things, I mentioned that Raspberry Pi just casually sitting next to my computer earlier, some of those things that they don't think of as really interesting projects or interesting ideas, other people grasp onto. They might have feedback like, oh, I'd be interested in like this little element of it, or what were the steps before that? And often these prompts end up focusing on problem solving, transferable skills, like these really low level parts of our jobs that we don't think of as often. So let's say you figured out which idea you're going to use to move forward. You're getting excited. You're, starting to like imagine what your outline might look like. You're seeing your main 3 points. They're starting to formulate. You start talking to people about it. And who do you run into? You run into your naysayer. And you all have had a naysayer at some point. This is the person who has something negative to say about everything. And when you're just getting started with a new skill, that can stop you dead in your tracks. So some things that I heard when I was getting started speaking, about one particular topic, I heard, the community just isn't ready for that. I heard, speaking will take you another direction, implying that it would make me appear less technical. I heard, soft talks put women and other minorities at risk for looking non-technical. You should wait until later in your career. So why do we listen to our naysayer? I said this person can stop you flat in your tracks. The real problem here is this person is saying they're literally your fears coming out of someone else's mouth. It's not easy to see yourself as a speaker. There are some topics that are difficult to broach. And when you decide you're going to commit to something and like go out and make this happen, it's a risk. I still have the, what if I'm up there and things are going wrong nightmares. They're totally normal. And it's been helpful for me to remember that this person is probably has the best intentions at heart and is, why would they discourage me? I assume it's because they're concerned for themselves and they know that they wouldn't be able to do it and they don't want to see me end up disappointed. So you have all these voices running in the back of your head. Your topic's no good. Community's not ready for it. Things are happening. How are you going to keep moving and set yourself up for success? The main thing you want to be doing right now, after you've picked out an idea or two or three or four or five, is start testing these ideas. And how do we test our ideas? Well, before you write any code, you need to talk to people who will be using the code. You need to make specs. There's all these steps. And we want to do the same things with our talks. So you need to be having conversations. One-on-one can be really helpful because people will say things like, in that setting that they might not say on Twitter and especially not on LinkedIn. You can start online discussions or Twitter polls. It's really interesting to hear what other people's thoughts are around a problem. And this first step can be extremely helpful. My to comment or not to comment talk about inline documentation, which was given at 14 events, 2 of which were international, that talk started as a Twitter poll with a whole 9 responses. And that's, nothing I can do anything with. But the fact that, 4 people said yes and 5 people said no told me that there was enough disagreement that I should keep looking. Oh, I see the smiles. Yeah, there was a big fight about comments and I wrote a talk about it. It was pretty good. So you can also try writing things out long form. I like the concept of putting something like that as like an update in a newsletter. Hey, I'm working on this thing. I'm bouncing these ideas around. Because again, it gives people one more setting in which to communicate with you. And you can send out a newsletter to 5 or 20 or, however many of your, supportive crew much faster than you can set up a bunch of one-on-one Zoom conversations. And it really also helps you get your thoughts together once they're written down in a way that, they were probably still bouncing around in your head. Finally, one important step that both the other speakers have mentioned as well is having conversations with people closer to or adjacent the problem. And in my case, a couple things will happen. First, you'll learn if there's anybody else that you need to be pulling in. So, if you start talking to someone who is in the field that you're talking about, they can very quickly say oh, well, I just do this adjacent work, but the person you need to talk to, and suddenly you've got another connection. And you may have a phone conversation that really upends your entire talk for the better. So in my, should I be putting screenshots into my version control talk that I mentioned earlier? I had a conversation with a woman who worked in design early on in my planning that really turned that talk around, because I learned that some of the tooling that I was wishing existed within a software framework actually existed within the world of design. So, that portion of my talk became, kind of me waving the flag and saying, hey, we should be looking, not only to what our best practices are, but to, if there's a designer on your team, they might be sitting on a gold mine that you could use. So having those different perspectives can really take your talk from like, kind of the story that most people have heard to like a really exciting, exciting addition. Finally, a lot of folks find it very helpful to give lightning talks before they give a full length talk. And this is helpful for a couple of reasons. It mentions the nerves it mentions, but it also eases the nerves that we were talking about earlier. In addition, people at that event and people who see your talk online are going to walk up to you and share exactly what they think. So now you're the person of the at that event who talks about this thing. And so suddenly you're going to have all these folks telling you, "Oh, have you heard of this tool or have you tried doing this in this way?" And it can really, give you, even more perspective than your work has so far. It can also be really helpful to consider other formats. Maybe you'll present at work or in a tutorial. And I apologize, that slide was supposed to go up a little earlier. And it's important to remember that disappointments are going to happen. Some audiences, even after they accept a talk, you get there and you find that they're less engaged. You may be surprised by a lack of engagement. So, for example, I have the To Comment or Not talk that I mentioned earlier and is so popular was given, after it was given internationally and everything like that, was given at a consultancy where many folks were changing clients frequently enough that they weren't interested in, developing this kind of intricate documentation. And I got this like absolutely deflated response and felt equally deflated myself. This is all normal. And it's also important to remember that when your talk is rejected, there's a lot of different reasons to reject a talk, one of which is we just had too many people offering up talks about data science this time. So it really helps to diversify the things that you're talking about and also have the expectation that if a talk is rejected, it's not you that's being rejected. And if you're worried, as one of my naysayers said earlier, that about giving that soft talk, I have found a sneaky way around that, and that is to give a technical talk, which also discusses the human interaction or like how teams are affected. And I find that many popular speakers are able to combine these as well. And Heidi Waterhouse, who's going to be speaking next month, so like hooray for that, is one who I especially admire for doing this. And so I encourage you to go into the world and learn more about yourself, your community, and whichever of those topics you choose. And that is me.
It was such an emotional journey. I don't know if it was such sensitive, perhaps, or was it an emotional journey for Akshat and Laura as well? What do you say?
Pain-driven development, very emotional.
Yeah, and especially I like about the pain-driven development. That was the one point which I was pretty much impressed with. And always like naysayers are our not I won't say that they are the biggest hurdle, but they are the one who are the one who motivates you a lot. Means we should always take them as a motivator, because they will always restrict you. Don't do this, don't do this, and then you have to prove them wrong. And so something, yeah, it was pretty much impressive talk. emotional, some sentimental.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. Actually, that's very good point about the pain-driven development. Usually, when you have the pain, you're researching the most about that topic, and suddenly you becoming knowing that field, and exactly you can talk about that then.